1994 was a very significant year in the history of Disney. One that some could say was the time that forever changed the company for better and for worse. Of course, the most notable moment of that year was the release of The Lion King, an animated film that the team was doubtful during production, but later become one of Disney's biggest and most beloved properties they've ever created. It was also the year when they released The Return of Jafar, the first animated direct-to-video feature that opened up a new opportunity for the company to dominate the home media market with low-budgeted direct-to-video sequels to their animated films. But, along with the ups, the year also came with a lot of downs that impacted the company as well. 1994 was also the year that Disney president Frank Wells passed away from a helicopter crash, and Disney Studios head Jeffrey Katzenberg resigned and left on bad terms, leaving CEO Michael Eisner as the lone prominently public figure in charge of the company, and became a changed man who lost his closest allies in one way or another. The effect from that 1 year seemed to be noticeably immediate, as their next highly anticipated animated feature, Pocahontas, didn't turn out to be the mega hit they were expecting. Does this mean the Disney Renaissance already peaked with The Lion King? Well, if so, then they better make the most out of their next features while they're still at the top, including The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's the story of Quasimodo, the isolated hunchback bell ringer of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, who decided to leave the bell tower for his first time to attend the Feast of Fools, even if it's against the wishes of his master, Judge Claude Frollo. His outing did not go well, but he did get his first taste of kindness from a gypsy named Esmeralda. Frollo also had a first experience from the girl, but this time, it's a feeling of lust that he's trying so hard to fight in fear that his sin would send him straight to hell, resulting him to set all of Paris on fire just to find her. Now it's up to Quasi to save his new friend before Frollo's wrath takes her down, along with the rest of the gypsies and possibly the entire city. Back in 1983, Disney executive David Stainton had a spark of an idea for an animated adaptation of the 1831 Victor Hugo novel, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, after reading the comic version by Classics Illustrated. It was a great idea, but the heads at Disney need to find the right people to lead the project. Meanwhile, after Beauty and the Beast, directors Kirk Wise and Gary Trousdale took a break from that kind of responsibility, and their next job after that was just helping out on the story of The Lion King. But following afterwards, they tried developing an Orpheus-style story with whales as a potential animated feature. But it wasn't working as well as they'd hoped. So Jeffrey Katzenberg called them to say they gotta scrap the Whales movie and work on Hunchback instead, to which they accepted, since they saw a lot more potential with that one to create something great. However, it would also immediately come with its own set of grueling challenges, most namely, adapting the novel into a family-friendly feature. It's no secret that there's a vast difference between the movie and the original novel. That's because the team at Disney had no choice but to make several adjustments in order to stay true to their own brand. These include making Quasimodo the central character, much like he was in the past live-action films, some massive adjustments to the protagonists to make them smarter and at least friendly to each other, and, most importantly, not make everyone dead at the end. But even with these adjustments, that didn't mean Disney stepped away from many of the book's more mature elements, giving the film several milestones for the studio that are the reasons why many state that this is one of Disney's darkest films. For one, this marked as Disney's most religious animated feature, since one of the themes is heavily based around late 15th century Catholic Christianity, including commentary regarding its views and how it can either save or corrupt someone. I mean, after all, the main location of the picture is in a cathedral. That, and it is also stated to be the first animated film to have a legitimate swear. I know that there were a few swears before, like jackass and hell, but I mean like a real hard swear.
D. Damnation. E. Eternal damnation. Good.
Oh, in the religious context. I see, that's disappointing. And I thought they'd go all out like Pumbaa. But the most notable change the crew made from the book to really Disneyfy the picture is the addition of the 3 living gargoyles, Hugo, Victor, and Laverne. While many say that they were an original creation by Disney, especially when their roles are the comedic sidekicks in the same style as the genie from Aladdin and Timon and Pumbaa from The Lion King, they did technically originate from the novel. Maybe not directly, but the trio was inspired by one sentence from the book that states,
"His cathedral was enough for him. It was peopled with marbled figures of kings, saints, and bishops, who at least did not laugh in his face and looked at him with only tranquility and benevolence. The other statues, those of monsters and demons, had no hatred for him. He resembled them too closely for that. It was rather the rest of mankind that they jeered at. The saints were his friends and blessed him. The monsters were his friends and kept watch over him. He would sometimes spend whole hours crouched before one of the statues in solidarity conversation with it."
Originally, the gargoyles were supposed to be named Cheney, Laughton, and Quinn, named after the 3 classic actors who played Quasimodo in previous Hunchback of Notre Dame films. However, in fear of getting a lawsuit from the actors' estates, they had to quickly make a change. The directors were close to just using the actors' first names instead, like Lon, Charles, and Anthony, but they ultimately went with the author's name for 2 of them, Victor and Hugo, and the third was called Laverne after one of the Andrews sisters. As for the casting, Sam McMurray and pop singer Cyndi Lauper were supposed to voice 2 of the gargoyles, but after the big name change that also resulted in changes in their personalities, the roles were recasted to Jason Alexander as Hugo after playing Abysmal in The Return of Jafar, and Mary Wicks as Laverne in her final film role. After she passed away on October of 1995, Jane Withers had to step in to record the rest of the lines that needed to be done. For the remaining gargoyle, Victor, Charles Kimbrug needed a bit more persuasion to join in. He wasn't a fan of the idea of an animated adaptation of the novel at first, but then after seeing the amount of research that was already done, he was quite impressed and joined the cast. But it wasn't just the gargoyles that went through some changes with their voices. Quasimodo was supposed to be played by Mandy Patinkin, but after a disastrous audition with him, they went with Tom Hulce instead, trying out different variations of what he would sound like and end up with a more youthful and natural voice, since the character in the book was about 20 years old anyways. As for Esmeralda, Demi Moore was the ideal choice for the role, but she wasn't all that comfortable with her singing. So much so that she even told the songwriters to find an actual singer for her song God Help the Outcast, which they went to get Heidi Mollenhauer to fill her in for the number. In 1995, thanks to the great success of their recent features, Disney built an entirely new animation studio in Burbank next to the main lot and have The Hunchback be the first animated movie to be developed in the building. But while most artists were already at work on films like The Lion King and Pocahontas, the team had to get some help from all around the world. Not only hiring new animators from Canada and the UK, but also from a few from their Florida studio and a whole team of about 100 animators in their animation studio in Paris, France, which they contributed to 10 minutes of the picture. While the animation demanded a lot more from the animators for this film, the biggest challenge was to know how to create a convincingly massive crowd, something that not even traditional animation was able to capture without the time and money that is impossibly needed. When looking back at what they did for The Lion King, if computers made it work for wildebeest, then they could certainly do it for people too. As a result, the CGI department created a new software called Crowds, which was able to create a variety of people who can do numerous of movements and have duplicates in different costumes and sizes be scattered all across the scene, delivering the illusion of a partying and lively crowd covering the streets of Paris during the Feast of Fools. Straight after their work on Pocahontas, Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz decided to make the songs for Hunchback because of how the themes really resonated with them. Also, it gave them an opportunity to level up their score, even going to London where they were able to include a 100-year-old organ and a choir from the English National Opera Company to the music. While the film itself does contain a large amount of musical numbers, there were a few that didn't make the cut. These included a couple of attempts of a love ballad for Esmeralda and Phoebus called In the Place of Miracles and As Long as There's a Moon, but because the songs took attention away from Quasimodo, it was replaced with the Court of Miracles. There was also Someday that was supposed to be sung by Esmeralda in the cathedral, but that ended up being switched to God Help the Outcast to have the mood of the moment be more humble. However, the song itself did not leave the movie entirely. On top of the melody often being used in the score, the end credits feature a pop version of the song made by different artists depending on the region. The North American English film featured R&B group All For One, the British English film had R&B group Eternal, and the Latin American Spanish film got Luis Miguel, which the latter ended up becoming a chart-topping hit. The movie was originally going to be released on Christmas 1995, but due to the departure of Jeffrey Katzenberg that shook things up in the company, it only got slightly delayed to about a half a year on June 21st, 1996. And on that release, Quasimodo's big animated moment in theaters was okay. It was certainly no Beauty and the Beast, but at least it wasn't a flop. Then again, it had a pretty cool parade in New Orleans for its premiere, and from there, the movie was introduced with a wide range of reactions from the public. There were critics who praised the film for its darker and more serious themes, the awe-inspiring animation, and the powerful music, even if they might have had issues with the changes from the Victor Hugo novel, and the French especially loved it, since it coincidentally came out not far after the Parisian police invaded Saint Bernard de la Chapelle to go after over 200 immigrants looking for refuge, and the movie served as a good reminder of the meaning of sanctuary. It even got some significant award nominations, like several at the Annies, and a Golden Globe and an Oscar for Best Score. On the other hand, as much as it has its lovers, it also got a good bunch of haters too. Fans of the original novel despised the feature for simplifying and censoring the book, and many parents felt that it was too dark and scary for children, especially when it goes into more mature subjects like religion and sexual desires. But financially, it did manage to come out fine. Even if it was the first animated film in history to have a budget in the 9-digit mark with $100 million, the film did turn a profit with $100.1 million domestically and $325.3 million worldwide. A modest success, but only pocket change compared to the amount made by the merchandising, since only a year after its release, those managed to give Disney an additional profit of $500 million. Following afterwards, the movie had a bit of a legacy and made a few appearances on other media, but it didn't really last long. It had a few notable moments at the parks, including a live show at Disney's Hollywood Studios from 1997 to 2002, a direct-to-video sequel in 2002 that featured new characters played by Haley Joel Osment, Michael McKean, and Jennifer Love Hewitt, an entire level with some of the characters featured in Kingdom Hearts 3D Dream Drop Distance, and a stage musical that stayed more true to the book that started in Berlin in 1999 and ran for 3 years, and then reappeared in English for a few months in San Diego and New Jersey between 2014 and 2015. While it didn't achieve the status of some of its predecessors as a prominent masterpiece, its dark themes and artistic strengths in the music and animation is what makes this stand out amongst Disney's lineup of features. To this day, the debate of how it adapted the book still goes on if it was for better or for worse, but it wouldn't take too long for the public to accept the movie as a Disney film to be cherished by generations to come. They probably wish it could have gone better, but for many, they will never forget how Disney powerfully rang the bells of Notre Dame. Going back to what Wise and Trousdale wanted to do before Hunchback, it was quite a coincidence to mention that they wanted to make a movie with a story based on Orpheus, because for their next movie, Disney would be entering into the world of Greek mythology. Maybe not with Orpheus, but with another well-known legend, Hercules. It's about a young lad named, of course, Hercules, who discovers that his real parents are the king and queen of the gods, Zeus and Hera, and the only way to become a god like them is to be a true hero. Even with the training he got from a satyr named Philoctetes, though, he later found that it was easier said than done. But with the ruler of the underworld, Hades, causing chaos to take him down and plotting to take over Mount Olympus, Herc will have to use his godlike powers to fight against Hades while learning what it takes to be among the gods. Other than Orpheus, the team at Disney tried to develop several ideas to turn a Greek legend into a potential animated feature. One of them, in 1992, was The Odyssey by Homer. But after some attempts to make it an animated comedy for modern audiences, they felt like they just couldn't do it and the whole project got scrapped. Soon after that, animator Joe Hader got a little panicky to make his pitch to Disney, since they might not be in the mood to hear about another Greek myth idea after throwing out Odyssey. His idea was based around the legend of Hercules during the Trojan War, where he learns that his super strength isn't always the answer to solve problems. To his surprise, the pitch was a hit, and Disney was set to go and make a Hercules movie. Meanwhile, after finishing Aladdin, directors John Musker and Ron Clements spent about a year trying to develop their passion project of an animated sci-fi adaptation of Treasure Island, with writers Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio. However, no matter how hard they tried, Jeffrey Katzenberg refused to make it happen. But then one day, they decided to make a deal. If Clements and Musker directed one more commercially appealing feature, then Katzenberg would let them make their Treasure Island movie. Well, it's not like they would get any other opportunity for it, so they took it and went searching for their next hit. It took a while to find it, going through ideas with not much weight to them like The Odyssey, Don Quixote, and Around the World in 80 Days, but then they found the Hercules pitch from the year prior. As comic book fans, this would give them the opportunity to make their own superhero movie, and they agreed to make Hercules their next film. While making a G-rated movie out of Hercules might not sound as accurate to the actual myth, that was kind of the point. Since early on, the directors agreed to go a little further away from the legends to keep it more family-friendly and not have to deal with Zeus's problem of being horny for everything he sees. This allows the team to go a bit more of an original route to make the story more like an action-packed screwball comedy, where the leads would act more like Jimmy Stewart and Barbara Stanwyck, and have the setting act like it's in modern times, but in ancient Greece. They even got the help of Bob Shaw and Donald McHenry to write some of the comedy. But what was proven to be the Herculean task of making the feature is having the right people for the cast. It often took a lot of persuasion from Disney to get someone, and even vice versa. The latter was the case for Susan Egan, who tried so hard during the 1990s to audition for Disney at every opportunity she could get. The most that she got at the time was playing the role of Belle in the Broadway production of Beauty and the Beast. While Alan Menken was hesitant at first to have her try out a role that's a lot more cynical than sweet, he let her audition anyways, and the filmmakers decided that she was the right fit to play as Megara. As for the part of Phil, John and Ron always wanted to have Danny DeVito play the character, but he was not easy to get on board. At first, Danny refused and led the team at Disney to go through several actors, but they knew that DeVito was the only choice for them. Even Red Buttons told them so after auditioning. So after a little lunch on the set of Matilda, Danny ultimately agreed and signed on for the role. Now that they got most of their actors set up and ready, the film is left with just one more important casting: Hades. Unlike Phil with Danny DeVito, the directors had no idea who they want as the villain. Danny was the first to recommend someone with Jack Nicholson, who was a pretty good choice at first, but they ultimately couldn't get a deal to sign him on. And they were way far off from each other. Like, Disney was ready to pay $500,000, while Nicholson asked for $10 to $15 million and half of the earnings from the Hades merchandising. Afterwards, it was just a massive hunt to find their right Hades. They were close with John Lithgow, but that ended up not working. It wasn't until James Wood stepped in with a more unique approach, acting like a fast-paced conning car salesman and ultimately landing the role. Early in production, Musker and Clements brought on board cartoonist Gerald Scarfe, best known for defining the art style of Pink Floyd's The Wall, to be the film's production designer to introduce a new style that's unlike anything that's been seen in a Disney film. In total, Scarf made over 700 different drawings to define the look of the feature and its characters, and the team ended up creating a style that's a mix of Scarf's work, ancient Greek art, and a bit of that Disney touch to translate it all into animation. While the casting was a tough journey for the filmmakers, the animators went through a bit of the same thing when being assigned a character. Andreas Deja was supposed to animate Hades since he had a lot of experience animating villains like Gaston, Jafar, and Scar, but he wanted to give himself a challenge and instead decided to work on the title character to at least include one protagonist in his portfolio. After that, Eric Goldberg was given the villain, but when he heard Jack Nicholson wasn't voicing him anymore, he lost interest. But then when Danny DeVito joined the cast and Chris Buck stepped out of animating the character, Goldberg took the shot and jumped in to be the supervising animator of Phil, even helping out in the final design to make him a combination of DeVito, Grumpy from Snow White, and Bacchus from Fantasia. As for Hades, who was always passed down from animator to animator, he was ultimately given to Nick Ranieri, who had the challenging task of continuously catching up with James Wood's speed to the point that it would take him 2 weeks just to animate a single second of the character. As Disney became more and more experimental with CGI technology with every film they make, they decided to step up their game by developing a fully CGI character with the Hydra. And this is not just a simple character to animate either. This is a serpent-like monster who can reproduce multiple heads whenever one of them gets decapitated, and by the climax of the scene, it would have about 30 heads simultaneously going after Herc. Oh, and did I forget to mention that Scarf made a complex design for the creature? While the battle sequence itself only lasted about 4 minutes, it took the technical team almost a year and a half to create the scene. On a side note, the computers were also used to create the morphing effects on the clouds in Mount Olympus. When Alan Menken worked on the music of the film, he was paired up with lyricist Dave Zippel, whom they previously worked together on the musical Diamonds. They wanted to implement a more Greek and classic tone to the music in the style of the operetta Candide, but John Musker suggested to try gospel music instead as a modern equivalent to the songs of ancient Greece, along with some traditional Broadway-style tunes like Go the Distance, One Last Hope, and I Won't Say I'm in Love. As the film was getting ready to hit the big screen, Disney hosted some major events to promote the feature, including a Hercules-themed carnival tour that appeared in several different malls across America, and a little taste of Disneyland with the theme of the film in New York City's Times Square that featured the Main Street Electrical Parade, a performance by Susan Egan, and a fireworks show. And by the time the movie went the distance on June 27, 1997, Herc did have some strength, but not a whole lot. The critics were mixed with the song, saying that they were not hitting the notes as high as the previous Disney films, and the animation is said to either be visually intriguing or look like a cheap eyesore. But on the other hand, they did say that it was a fun movie regardless, and gave massive praise to James Woods' performance. Later at the awards, while not prominently featured, it did get nominated at the Oscars and the Golden Globes for the song Go the Distance, and won 4 Annie Awards. As for the box office, it did get a bit of profit, but it was noticeable that Disney was making progressively less and less with their films, this time only making $99 million domestically and a worldwide total of $252.7 million. Dick Cook, the president of Disney's distribution at the time, theorized that the underperformance of Hercules was due to being released around the same time as competitors that were fighting for the same kind of audience, like Men in Black and Batman and Robin. From then on, Herc and the gang did have a few prominent moments after the movie, including an animated series in 1998 that ran for 2 seasons and 65 episodes, including one where they did a crossover with Aladdin. 3 of the episodes were also packaged together as its own direct-to-video prequel the next year called Hercules Zero to Hero. Outside of television, Hercules was also a prominent level throughout the Kingdom Hearts games, and in 2019, a stage adaptation of the film was played at Central Park in New York City that was a collaboration between Disney and the Public Theater. In the eyes of Disney, Hercules may not have been the true hero they were hoping for when the first film came out, But since then, the public picked up this gift from the gods and turned it into a fan favorite, with many still in love with many of the unforgettable personalities and singing many of the feature's catchy songs. It took a bit of time, even long after the release, but Herc managed to prove that he can go from zero to Disney hero. As the team in Burbank continuously kept producing more major animated features with the help of the team from France on both Hunchback and Hercules, the animation crew in the Walt Disney World studio in Florida didn't have much time to assist on whatever those two were working on. They were busy on a much bigger project in the hopes that it can help expand the division to prove that they can do much more than just lend a helping hand and produce shorts. They were developing their own animated feature, and their first was Mulan. During the Han Dynasty, the Huns have invaded China to prove their dominance over the Emperor. In order to fight back, the Emperor himself asked for one man of each family to join the Chinese army, which is a problem for the Fa family, since their only man, Fa Zhu, is far from being as strong as he used to be. His daughter, Fa Mulan, however, had different plans to save her father. Since she can't be a good bride, she secretly disguised herself as a man to join the army. Now, with the help of her guardian spirit sent by her ancestors, Mushu, Mulan will do everything she can to fight against the Huns while making sure her true identity remains a secret. Back in 1993, Disney was interested in creating a project that was based around Asian legends, since, as you could tell, they were more open to adapt other stories outside of fairy tales like classic novels and international myths. One of them they were trying out was a short called China Doll, which was about a Chinese girl who falls in love with a British prince. Also, they were talking with children's book author Robert D. Sansucci regarding potential ideas for stories. One of them he had in mind was an adaptation of the Chinese poem, The Ballad of Hua Mulan, which sounded intriguing for the company, and went on to combine Susi's idea and their China Doll project into a possible feature. Meanwhile, during the height of their animated films in the 1990s, Disney was open to let their Florida team to produce their first feature film. When Disney executive Thomas Schumacher asked Barry Cook to meet with him after directing the Roger Rabbit short Trail Mix-Up, he was offered two potential movies to direct, either Mulan or a film set in Scotland that featured a dragon. It took a bit of negotiating, but Cook accepted to do Mulan, but only if the film would include a dragon, since they are prominent in Chinese mythology. Not long after, thanks to a recommendation from Lion King director Rob Minkoff, animator Tony Bancroft joined the crew as well to be a co-director. Originally, when they started crafting the story, they wanted to go in a direction that went further from the original poem. It was more of a rom-com where Mulan joined the army because of the typical wanting more for herself than what she's been offered in her regular life. For the head of story, Chris Sanders, this proved to be a frustrating challenge to make it work, to the point that he asked the filmmakers to stick more to the original source material. The result turned out to be much better, since it also made the title character more selfless now that her choice to go is because she wants to save her sick father. But while it devoted itself more to be faithful to the poem, that didn't stop them from wanting to put some additions to their story. And since this is a Disney movie, the crew had to include some comedic sidekicks. Since the studio wanted another improvising comic relief in the style of the genie from Aladdin, Roy E. Disney thought up of an idea of a little dragon named Mushu, voiced by Eddie Murphy, who went through various concepts before settling on his final look, including having two heads, or even be two separate characters working as a duo. The other sidekick, created by longtime Disney veteran Joe Grant, was a little cricket named Cricky, whom no one actually liked in the studio because the team thought that he was pointless to the story. The only reason why he stayed in the film was because one of the very few that did like him was Michael Eisner, along with Joe and the character's animator, Barry Temple. For the voices of the film, the team knew that they wanted a mostly Asian cast. Originally, the singing voice of Jasmine in Aladdin, Lea Salonga, was supposed to be the voice of Mulan. but the directors weren't too convinced that she could fully do the job when her deeper voice when pretending to be a man wasn't good enough. So they went with Ming-Na Wen to play the part after hearing her narration in the Joy Luck Club. However, Salonga wasn't fully out of the role, since she still stayed as Mulan's singing voice. Also, keep in mind before that I said that the film had a mostly Asian cast. There are a few notable non-Asian actors featured as well, like the already mentioned Eddie Murphy as Mushu, Harvey Feinstein as Yao, Donny Osmond as the singing voice of Shang, Miguel Ferrer as Shan Yu, and voice acting legend June Foray as Grandmother Fa, just to name a few. Also, while he did not work on the English version, Jackie Chan provided the voice of Shang in all 3 Chinese versions of the movie, including Standard Mandarin, Taiwanese Mandarin, and Cantonese, as well as singing I'll Make a Man Out of You. Early in production, the team went on a 3-week trip around China for research and took a lot of inspiration from that moment that ended up featured in the movie, including the world building, some plot elements, and even the designs to authenticate the Chinese traditions. Since the Florida studio was initially built small to primarily assist the animators in California, Disney made a massive expansion where they could fit an additional 400 artists in the building, making the total of people who worked on the film, along with the story aides in Burbank, around 700 animators. To achieve the look of Mulan, they assigned the help of production designer Hans Bacher to establish the style of Chinese art onto the picture, meaning that the film had to incorporate more watercolors and simpler designs than what Disney was used to with their previous films, along with the colors playing a bigger role. They also brought in character designer Chang Yi Chang to finalize the look of the characters so that they could also feature the simpler aesthetics of Chinese artwork. Just like with the previous films, CGI was brought on board in order to create giant crowds for a few scenes. In this case, it was for when the thousands of Huns were charging at the army on a snowy mountain, capable of creating thousands of combinations of different looks, facial hair, weapons, and animations as they run down the mountain. However, not all the large crowds were 3D rendered. The computers were also able to make crowds out of 2D animated characters, taking individual animations and scattering them across some prominently long shots. Also, for the backgrounds, they created a new software called Faux Plane, which allows the artist to take a flat painting and manipulate it digitally to give it some depth. Think of it like the digital equivalent of the old multiplane camera system from Walt's days. Originally, Stephen Schwartz was supposed to develop the songs for the feature. However, he was called by Jeffrey Katzenberg to work at his new studio DreamWorks to make the songs for an animated adaptation of the Book of Exodus called The Prince of Egypt. As much as the heads at Disney begged him not to go, Schwartz went to DreamWorks anyways, and the songs he did write for the film, like China Doll, Written in Stone, and Destiny, were inevitably scrapped when the crew made some changes to the story. In his place, they hired Matthew Wilder and brought back David Zippel to create 5 songs for the movie. There was a 6th one called Keep 'Em Guessing that was meant to be sung by Mushu and was a favorite amongst the filmmakers, but had to be dropped when Eddie Murphy was brought on board. Because of the disappointing box office results of their recent animated features, Disney had to scale back on the promotion of Mulan. It didn't have any major events or lavish parades outside of the parks or crazy mall tours. Instead, the most that it got was a special premiere at the Hollywood Bowl and a promotional campaign with McDonald's where they sold Szechuan sauce with its Chicken McNuggets. The sauce would return for a limited time in 2017 thanks to being referenced in the Adult Swim show Rick and Morty. And it was a complete disaster. When the movie was released on June 19th, 1998, it was actually a step up from before. At least, it slightly did. It managed to collect $120 million domestically and $304 million worldwide. And the critics were genuinely impressed with the feature, like for its animation, story, and title character. Maybe not all of them felt the same way, but it had been a while since they received a good amount of praise like this. especially with the awards when it got nominations like an Oscar for Best Score, 2 at the Golden Globes for Best Score and Best Song with Reflection, and won 10 Annie Awards, including Best Animated Feature. Speaking of Reflection, the pop version of the song is credited to be the debut single of Christina Aguilera, who was only 17 when the film came out. After its theatrical run, Mulan had a few little appearances across the world of Disney, like in the parks, including when Mushu co-hosted a special show that talked about the process of animation, the Kingdom Hearts games, and on television like The House of Mouse and Once Upon a Time. The most significant moments she had after the feature were a couple of other movies, like a direct-to-video sequel called Mulan 2 in 2004, and a live-action remake directed by Nikki Caro. Many may say that it is a strange fact that this is an animated film made at Walt Disney World, but it did prove to Disney that the Florida team was also capable of crafting features that would resonate with the public as much as the ones made in California. To this day, people still connect with this movie, as they consider Mulan as one of the strongest of the Disney princesses and use I'll Make a Man Out of You as their motivational anthem. As the Emperor himself said it best,
"You don't meet a girl like that every dynasty."
Meanwhile, back at the studios in Burbank and Paris, the animators were hard at work on their next project that took a break from international legends. Instead, their next movie would take a similar route to Hunchback and adapt a classic novel to the big screen, taking the pages of Edgar Rice Burroughs and turn them into Tarzan. It's the life of a man named Tarzan, who was raised by gorillas after his real parents were killed by the leopard Sabor. Upon his adulthood, now fully adapted to his jungle environment, he encounters for the first time people that are just like him, including a hunter named Clayton, a professor named Porter, and his daughter Jane. Clayton may have a hidden agenda to bag some gorillas, but Tarzan's a bit occupied with having some feelings he never felt before towards Jane, putting the ape man in a difficult spot to either stay and protect his gorilla family or live a new life with his own kind. For Disney, making an animated adaptation of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan seemed like a no-brainer. There have been plenty of Tarzan adaptations before, but never a legitimate one in animation, since it seemed like the perfect medium to do so in order to fully present Tarzan's skills to glide through the jungle and his relationship with the animals like with Kala. So in 1995, Michael Eisner contacted the director of A Goofy Movie, Kevin Lima, to take on the project as his next helming job, which he accepted and later convinced his friend, animator Chris Buck, to join in as co-director. After studying the first book for 2 months, the first idea he had for the movie was when Tarzan and Jane had their hands together, marking a symbolic moment that would be the key in finding the heart of the story to present Tarzan's search for his own identity. Originally, when writer Tab Murphy did the first script, the movie was supposed to end with Tarzan leaving the jungle to move to England with Jane like in the novel. However, the directors were not fond of the idea since it doesn't go well with the feature's theme of family and doesn't give as much intensity that there's much danger going on. So to fix up the issue and to keep Tarzan in the jungle, the team at Disney created a new villain, Clayton, where he would join Porter and Jane's exposition in the African jungle as a guide with a secret plan to poach gorillas. Technically, there is a Clayton in the book series, but the only similarities they have is that they both share the same name. As for the original villain of the book, Kerchak, his role got switched to emphasize that he is the responsible leader of the group while refusing to accept Tarzan as his own son. Later on, the studio also brought in Dave Reynolds, Noni White, and Bob Sudeker to add some comedy in order to lighten up the mood of the story and its emotional themes. For the role of Tarzan as an adult, they got Tony Goldwyn after he landed the audition thanks to his strong voice and ability to imitate animals. However, he wasn't able to do the signature Tarzan yell. That had to be done by the voice of Clayton, Brian Blessed. But the ones that proved to be the toughest to cast was actually Tarzan's comedic buddies. Turk was originally going to be a male gorilla, but decided to slightly alter the character as a tomboy female when Rosie O'Donnell got the part. As for Tantor, Woody Allen was supposed to voice him, but Jeffrey Katzenberg once again swiped him away from Disney after making a deal for DreamWorks to distribute his next pictures and be the voice of the lead in their animated film, Ants. Ultimately, the elephant was voiced by Wayne Knight.
Absolutely, I'd love to voice the funny cartoon elephant for your film. No need to fear, as this is a job for... the Wayne Knight!
Unlike the previous productions, where there would be one main studio working on the film with the others helping out, Tarzan was a full collaboration between the team at Burbank and the team in Paris, especially when Glenn Keane had to be the supervising animator of the title character in the latter. The Florida crew also came into production once they were finished with Mulan. While Tarzan may seem like a simple character to animate, since he's just a guy acting like an animal who only wears a piece of loincloth, those attributes were what made Tarzan actually more challenging to draw. Because he's almost naked, Tarzan had to feature a realistically muscular anatomy and limited to moving like a real person when behaving like an animal. This is why the team hired a professor of anatomy to give the animators a full understanding of how Tarzan's body works, resulting in him being the first Disney character to show working muscles. Another challenge with the Ape Man was to animate how he would go from tree to tree. There were some ideas taken from how monkeys swing through vines, but Glenn Keane's main source of inspiration was from surfing-style actions like skateboarding and snowboarding, based on his son's interest in extreme sports. Speaking of him surfing and swinging through the trees, the team wanted to develop a special 3D background that could blend with the traditional look of the film, but also allow the camera to be swinging around with Tarzan in one big elaborate shot. This is why they have developed a new software called Deep Canvas, which let the animators create the environment in CGI and paint the digital models in the same style as the actually painted backgrounds, resulting in the 2D Tarzan to move around this 3D world while still looking like it was all handmade. A few years later, Deep Canvas earned the Technical Achievement Award at the Oscars. While Disney was on a roll with making musicals at the time, Lima and Buck decided not to have their characters sing because it would just seem a bit awkward if this half-naked guy would suddenly burst into song in the middle of the jungle. However, the film still required to produce some hit songs, and since this is a feature that wanted to emphasize the percussions to match with the African theming, Disney brought on board Phil Collins to work on the soundtrack, where the songs he made are meant to reflect on the thoughts of the characters like Tarzan and Kala during their respective scenes. Since the movie was translated in the most languages for Disney at the time with 35, Collins recorded his songs in 5 of those languages, like in English, French, Spanish, Italian, and German.
Put your faith in what you most believe in. Du monde, une seule famille. Degliara, non sai perché, das Leben zeigt dir wie.
When the film was released on June 12, 1999, it was the first major motion picture in history to be produced, mastered, and projected digitally, and it came out as the theatrical king of the jungle. It was a great hit at the box office by making $171 million domestically and $448 million worldwide, and the critics admired the work put into the feature, like the thoughtfully heartfelt story, the Phil Collins music, and the state-of-the-art animation. The movie even received a few awards like an Annie for technical achievement with Deep Canvas, a Grammy for Best Soundtrack Album, and an Oscar and a Golden Globe for Best Song with You'll Be in My Heart. For the remaining time that Disney had the rights to Tarzan, they made the most out of it by turning the movie into its own franchise, including a sequel series called The Legend of Tarzan in 2001 that ran for 2 seasons and 35 episodes, which 3 of them that were unaired were packaged in the direct-to-video film Tarzan and Jane in 2002, a level in the first Kingdom Hearts game, a midquel direct-to-video feature in 2005 called Tarzan 2, and a stage musical that ran for over a year on Broadway between 2006 and 2007. There are also a couple of notable mentions at the parks, like Tarzan's Treehouse in Disneyland and Hong Kong Disneyland, and Tarzan Rocks, a musical show in Disney's Animal Kingdom in Walt Disney World that ran for 7 years until it was replaced by Finding Nemo the Musical in 2006. As Tarzan swung Disney into a better position with their animated features both critically and financially, nothing could prepare them for what was to come. Right around the corner was a brand new millennium, which signified a new age in modern culture with plenty of changes and technical achievements in store. But with the beginning of a new era, it would come at the cost of concluding the old one, meaning that Disney's renaissance with their animated features was over.
You know, Fantasia was meant to be a perpetual work in progress. Every time you went to see it, you'd experience some new pieces along with some old familiar favorites. But that idea fell by the wayside until now.